So recently I've been replaying the Resident Evil games, getting so hyped and once again reigniting my love for this series. As I've been going through each of the games, it's got me thinking about the history and creation of Resident Evil, where it all began, and how it changed along the way. With the RE2 remake on the horizon, I think now is the perfect time for us to take an in-depth look at my favorite video game series. Come with me as we enter the survival horror. The story behind Resident Evil's creation is really cool and originates with old-school Capcom designer Tokuro Fujiwara. Fujiwara has a storied history with Capcom. He was the director of arcade classics like Ghosts and Goblins and Bionic Commando. He also worked on other Capcom games like Mega Man 2 and Strider. Fujiwara would end up directing a horror-themed RPG called Sweet Home. This game was released on the Famicom in 1989 and was based on a Japanese horror film of the same name. Sweet Home features top-down classic RPG gameplay, but its most unique feature that made it stand out is its emphasis on puzzle solving and survival. The game also takes place in a giant mansion. Sweet Home was never released officially outside of Japan, but you can find fan translations of the game online. The game quickly became a cult classic and is often cited as a huge step in the right direction for horror games as a whole. As time went on and new console hardware was being developed, Fujiwara noticed that the recently in development PlayStation console was very powerful compared to the current consoles of the time. He decided he wanted to remake Sweet Home on this new and much more powerful hardware. With the power of the PlayStation, Fujiwara would be able to implement features and graphical elements that were impossible to do with the Famicom's hardware. This remake project began its development in 1993. Hot off the release of Goof Troop on Super Nintendo, Capcom dev Shinji Mikami would be in charge with the direction of Fujiwara's new horror game. Fujiwara chose Mikami to direct because Mikami didn't like being scared. Fujiwara thought this was a great idea because Mikami, being the scaredy cat that he was, would be able to know what was and wasn't scary. During development of this game, Capcom would end up losing the rights to Sweet Home, forcing the team to take what they had and make an original game out of it. That original game was Resident Evil. Resident Evil was released worldwide in 1996. The game is also known as Biohazard in Japan. Apparently, the marketing team at Capcom of America informed the main Japanese branch of the company that it would be very difficult to register the name Biohazard in America. Capcom actually held a company-wide contest to change the name of this game. Personal note, I happen to think Resident Evil is the most appropriate title for this game. I mean, you are fighting evil in a residence. Makes sense, right? Like Sweet Home, Resident Evil was another revolutionary step in the right direction for horror video games. With Resident Evil, Capcom actually coined the legendary genre title of survival horror, and nothing shows that better than Resident Evil's gameplay. Resident Evil's gameplay focuses on exploration, resource management, and survival. As you explore this mysterious mansion and its surrounding areas, you'll encounter a variety of creatures, like zombies, giant spiders, bloodthirsty crows, and other experimental monsters. The enemies in this game take a lot of punishment. They're very bullet spongy, and if you decide to take them on, you better be prepared. You really have to think carefully about using whatever supplies you find during your adventure. Ammo and healing items are pretty scarce, and you never know what can be lying in wait when you enter a new room. Sometimes you'll walk into a room that's just packed with zombies. It's important to realize that not every encounter is worth fighting. It'll pay off more to avoid conflict rather than facing it head-on. It's better to carefully dodge around enemies than come back when you've collected enough ammo to take down the monsters blocking your path. Besides your ammo and healing, you also have to collect single-use ink ribbons in order to save your progress at typewriters scattered throughout the game. These ink ribbons are hard to come by and force you to think strategically about saving. This is some hardcore stuff, and sometimes you'll be playing for hours and not have the ability to save because you're out of ink ribbons. It's a genius way to increase the tension and stress the game is going for with its horror. You could potentially lose a lot of progress if you're not playing smart. Dying in this game hits really hard, you can't just restart from a checkpoint. You'll usually find the typewriters and save rooms. These save rooms also contain the universal item box. With these item boxes, you can store away unwanted items when your inventory is full. All of the item boxes in the game are linked together, so when you drop an item into one box, you can retrieve it later from another box in a completely different room. What a nice, convenient game mechanic. This feature really cuts down on backtracking as you get further into the game. Puzzle solving and finding key items are also major elements to Resident Evil's gameplay. The puzzles in this game are good, but they're not like brain busters. You'll get through them pretty quickly, and solving them on your first playthrough is really fun. Most of them serve as progression checkpoints throughout the game, and some even trigger deadly traps that require quick thinking or a Barry to solve. There are also quick optional puzzles that just give you items and new weapons. There are a few crate puzzles in certain parts of the game that kind of feel like padding. They're pretty annoying on repeat playthroughs, but overall the design of the game's puzzles and traps are great. It's not just RE's monsters and limited resources that can induce tension. The game uses a movement system often referred to as tank controls. If you're unfamiliar with how these controls work, let me describe it for you. So imagine this. Pressing up on the D-pad moves your character forward, pressing down moves them backward, and pressing left or right rotates the character either left or right. This works in whatever direction the character is facing. At first it can be kinda difficult to get used to this type of movement, especially while being attacked by monsters, but if you just stick with it, you'll get the hang of it and will be moving around like a champ. I'm not sure if it was intentional to make the controls complicated for beginners, but it really does a great job at stressing out new players and heightening the fear just a little bit more. This game also uses a fixed camera. Fixed camera angles were a very common thing back in the day. Controllers didn't really have dual thumbstick layouts for you to control the camera with. The camera often hides enemies off screen, so when you enter a room, you'll usually hear the terrifying groans of monsters before seeing them. It's pretty creepy and really effective. Both tank controls and fixed cameras are pretty controversial now, and yeah, they're a little clunky, they're a little outdated, but I really like both of these mechanics. They work really well together. Say you're running down a hallway and the camera angle changes suddenly. You won't get all turned around like with a traditional 3D movement system. If you're holding up, your character is moving forward. It's as simple as that. These features make the game feel more precise and cinematic, and don't ever hamper down the gameplay. I think it's perfect. Before you start the game, you get to choose to play as either Chris Redfield or my wife, Jill Valentine. Both Chris and Jill's stories ultimately play out in the same way, but the difficulty and events you'll be experiencing will differ depending on who you choose. Chris's game is harder. He only has 6 item slots in his inventory, doesn't get access to the bazooka, and has to collect small keys to open certain doors throughout the mansion. These keys also take up item slots in Chris's inventory, adding to the difficulty of his journey. Chris does meet up with STAR's rookie officer, Rebecca Chambers, and at certain points in the game, Rebecca can heal Chris's wounds. You'll also have to play as Rebecca in order to help Chris out of danger during some of the story events. It also seems like ammo is a little bit more scarce in Chris's game, but I think that's only because he gets one less weapon than Jill does. So I guess he does still technically pick up less ammo. Jill's game is a lot easier. She starts off with a lockpick given to her by fellow officer, Barry Burton. You can use this lockpick to open the doors that require the small keys found in Chris's game. So the small key doesn't even exist for Jill. Jill also has access to the bazooka that you can get very quickly at the start of the game. This powerful grenade launcher absolutely decimates almost every enemy with a single shot. And guess what? You'll find a ton of ammo for it too. Barry can also show up and help Jill out of a bunch of situations. For example, if you want to get the shotgun out of this room, all you have to do is take it. Once you leave, the ceiling will start to come down. But Barry will save you, so you don't have to worry about it. Chris, on the other hand, has to do this whole side quest where you have to replace the real shotgun with a broken one in order to exit the room safely. Jill can also get the shotgun in this way, but it's much quicker to just have Barry come and save you. Jill may have more benefits than Chris, but she's also weaker than him, which means if you get hit a lot, you'll be healing a lot too, spending those valuable healing items in the process. I think all of this is really cool. It makes both games feel unique and encourages you to play through both stories. Both campaigns are very enjoyable and replayable, but I'll talk more about the game's replayability later. For now, let's dive deeper into the story. Our story begins on the outskirts of Raccoon City. STAR's Alpha Team, an elite unit of the Raccoon City police force, is investigating the disappearance of their compatriots, STAR's Bravo Team. When Alpha arrives at the missing team's last known location, they find their helicopter and nothing else. After searching the area, one of the officers finds the remains of another STAR's member. Out of nowhere, Alpha Team is attacked by a pack of ravenous dogs. The team desperately run back to their own helicopter, but the pilot is already taking off.
No! Don't go!
With no other options, Alpha Team runs to a dark and mysterious mansion off in the distance. They thought this mansion would be a safe haven from the monsters chasing them, but little did they know, they just stepped into a nightmare.
What is this?
Wow, what a mansion!
The perfect setup to the perfect game. I'll talk about these guys in a bit. Resident Evil's simple escape story goes hand in hand with its gameplay. You start in the mansion, solving puzzles and gaining an understanding of survival and resource conservation. You'll be fighting your way through zombies and a giant snake monster, tackling puzzles in whatever order you want. Each puzzle you complete earns you a crest, and gathering all 4 crests opens the back door to the garden area. This leads you to the guardhouse, basically a smaller version of the mansion with its own puzzles and boss fights. Defeating the boss of this area, Plant 42, a giant mutated poisonous plant, you find another mansion key. On your way back to the main house, you run into your captain, Albert Wesker. He disappeared earlier in the story and is now acting kinda shady. Arriving back at the mansion, you explore the rest of what it has to offer, while also engaging with a new enemy type, the Hunters. These agile, lizard-like men open up a new challenge for this game, making the zombies you've been fighting up to this point feel like a walk in the park. Seriously, the Hunters are no joke, and they take way more damage than zombies do. After solving more puzzles and gathering new weapons, and a particular key item that doesn't seem to have a use yet, you eventually find the means to open a secret passageway into an underground cave system. The caves are crawling with Hunters, and a giant spider. Soon you'll be finding more key items down here that lead you to a new area, as well as one of your missing comrades from Bravo Team, Enrico. He warns you that there's a traitor in Stars before getting shot by someone lurking in the shadows behind you. A traitor in Stars? Who could it be? Exiting the caves, you move on to the final area, the secret underground lab. In the lab, you find all the answers to the questions you've had up to this point. A lot of the game's text files and diary entries you've been finding have all mentioned the nightmarish experiments going on in this place. And now, you're finally here. In the lab, you encounter a new creature, the Deadly Chimera. It's sort of an amalgamation of the monsters you fought up to this point. It has a human shape like a zombie, but also has the speed and durability of a hunter, while also being able to climb on the ceiling. In short, this thing is a total nightmare, and I highly recommend not fighting them if you're short on supplies. During your exploration of this dark, underground nightmare world, you figure out that the discs you've been finding throughout the game are to be used at specific consoles that, when activated, grant you access to a secret holding cell area. In the cell, you'll find one of your missing comrades. This will either be Chris if you're playing as Jill, or Jill if you're playing as Chris. The door is locked, so you'll have to come back later to save your partner. Continuing your investigation, you come across a slide for a projector. Viewing its contents reveals the names and project numbers of each of the creatures you've encountered on your journey. The final slide, however, shows a group of Umbrella Corporation scientists, and one of them looks very familiar. Restoring the power to the lab's elevator, you go down to the basement level, and there you find out who's behind all of this. It's Captain Wesker! Wesker pretty much spills his guts about working for the Umbrella Corporation and trapping the STARS members in the mansion to test them against the creatures him and his colleagues have been creating.
You guys are idiots.
Before killing you, Wesker decides to show you his ultimate creation, the Tyrant. After listening to Wesker's villainous monologue, the monster breaks out of its containment pod and ends up killing its creator. Serves you right. Fighting the creature, you notice that it goes down very easily, almost without a fight. Just then, the self-destruct sequence activates. That means it's time to get the hell out of here. You meet up with either Barry or Rebecca, depending on who you're playing as, and also save your partner trapped in the cell from before. Reaching the surface helipad, you launch a flare to signal your helicopter pilot who's still in the area and trying to make contact with you via radio. All of a sudden, the ground starts to shake and burst open. The Tyrant is back and stronger than he was before. This fight is brutal. Tyrant truly is the ultimate monster in this place. Once you deal enough damage to the beast, the helicopter pilot drops you the most badass quad-barrel rocket launcher I've ever seen. You pick it up and fire it at the Tyrant, blowing it to smithereens, and get out of there in the nick of time as you watch the mansion erupt in a glorious, fiery explosion. Amazing. You and your friends made it out alive. Time to fly off into the sunset. All of this is packed into a perfectly paced 8 to 10 hour experience. The game just moves and you don't ever notice it while playing. Everything you accomplish feels so satisfying because you have so much to balance with your inventory, fleeting supplies, and dealing with enemies. That opening mansion level is really good. Once you get the armor key, you have access to almost every room and can complete the puzzles in whichever order you want. And the same goes for when you come back to the mansion later. I love this open-ended design. It's the perfect balance between free exploration and linear progression. I also really appreciate how the game introduces new enemies to previously explored areas. It keeps you on your toes at all times. The best part is that all of what I just told you with the story will probably play out differently for you. Your actions will affect and change the story's outcome and determine whether or not certain characters will live or die. When playing as Jill, after the second fight with Yawn, the giant snake, Barry will show up and help you climb down into a hole in the ground using a rope. Once you go down the hole, the rope falls in with you. Barry leaves you to go get another rope, and from there, you can either descend further into the basement of the mansion, or you can literally wait for Barry to come back with another rope and climb out of the hole. This changes your experience because now you no longer need to go through the basement and kitchen areas to get a plot-sensitive key item. Barry just gives you the code to a locked door that leads you right to that item. If you leave Barry when you're in the hole, he actually ends up dying later on in the end of the game. But if you wait for him, that'll change the story. He will survive and help you in the rest of the game. Both characters have moments like this, and it encourages repeat playthroughs in both scenarios. If that wasn't enough, depending on who survives, you'll actually earn different endings, and there are a total of 6 for both characters. Earning different endings is actually another feature inspired by Sweet Home. The game also has a bunch of unlockables adding to its replay value. Costumes and super-powered weapons are all there for you if you can get the best endings for both characters and beat the game with a fast time. This also encourages speedruns. By the way, speedruns for this game are amazing to watch and purely skill-based. I've told you guys a lot about the story and how things can change, but there's something else I've been saving for you, and I think you may know what it is.
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
The voice acting in Resident Evil is incredible. Even if you've never played this game, you still know about the voice acting. Resident Evil has birthed some of the very first internet memes with its characters' dialogue. Every single character in this game is terrible, but one of them in particular stands out as truly legendary: Barry Burton. We all know his famous lines like Master of Unlocking and Jill Sandwich, but the thing is, almost everything said by Barry is memeable. This guy, he just doesn't know when to quit.
What is this? Chris is our old partner, you know. What? What is this? Hope this is not Chris's blood. What is it? Wesker! Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the Master of Unlocking, take it with you. That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich. Yeah. Whoa! This hall is dangerous. Just a moment. I found something. It's a weapon. It's really powerful, especially against living things. I have this. What a monster. I can't believe... What the hell is this place anyway? How about going down to check by yourself? I have a rope here. I'm really embarrassed.
Some of this stuff isn't even proper English.
Do you think we could see Tyrant now?
Barry, you're so optimistic.
Okay, Jill, what does that mean? It's like every human in this game is secretly an alien pretending to be a normal person.
Jill, you're here too.
Yes, you're here too?
If it wasn't obvious, this game was written by someone who clearly didn't have a full grasp of the English language. It's pretty crazy looking back on this game and seeing Wesker acting so strangely.
That's right. This is the ultimate life form. Tyrant! Chris? Stop it.
He's so pathetic in this game. In the rest of the series, he becomes such a cold-blooded badass, but in the first game, he's a total weirdo. Rebecca sounds like an 80s anime girl, and all of Jill's lines are read in such a way that make her sound very confidently confused. Like one of those people that tries to speak with big words, but they don't really know what they mean. I hope that description makes sense.
Well, he was talking about the world's most powerful biological weapon, called Tyrant or something, I think.
As a kid, I used to be really scared by this game. It was like watching a horror movie, but now I just can't help but look at it like it's a campy all-American Saturday morning cartoon. And the thing is, I really love it. I love all of these guys. Whenever I hear any of these lines, it brings me back to when I was young. Hearing, "I have this," it's like being home again. Gives me the warm fuzzy feeling. This game is so great. I'm not the only one who thought it was great either, because as you may know, once Resident Evil launched, it was a smash hit and sold well over 2 million copies worldwide in its first year. A huge success for Capcom, earning it a full franchise of games including sequels and spin-offs that have all been released over the past 22 years. It's crazy to think about. It's almost impossible to not know about Resident Evil at this point. The first game even got a novelization that I think is pretty good. It goes more in depth with the characters' backstories and the events that lead up to the mansion incident. The novel also got its own book series too. 1 year after the game's release, Capcom put out a director's cut version that included many changes and new game modes, as well as having an uncut intro for the beginning of the game. Except they made a mistake with the Western release of director's cut, so the intro is actually still censored. Good job, guys. Also, director's cut has some pretty strange music. I don't know why they would want to change the awesome atmospheric original music. Jeez. Resident Evil was also ported to other consoles like the Sega Saturn, PC, and Nintendo DS. I might make a full video talking about Resident Evil DS because that version of the game is just so unique and great on its own. We also got a remake of Resident Evil on the GameCube years later. Fun fact, the remake is my favorite game of all time, and is probably the best remake of anything ever made. So, you know I'm gonna be making a video on that. Stay tuned. Resident Evil was not only a step in the right direction for horror games, but the evolution of the genre as a whole. It literally invented survival horror and inspired some of the best horror games that came after it. The game is almost perfect, featuring really polished gameplay with so much replayability. Resident Evil is an amazing gaming experience that everyone should have. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll get spooked, and you'll fall in love with Barry. If you haven't already, please try out this game. The director's cut is available on the PlayStation Store right now for only a few dollars. And the DS version is a little more expensive, but it is available. You won't regret it, I promise. Who would have known that a Sweet Home remake, directed by a fledgling game dev, would transform into one of the most influential and genre-defining video game series of all time? Fujiwara, Mikami, and everyone else that helped make this game and start this amazing series, thank you. You did a fine job. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video, and I hope you're excited for RE2 coming up next in my retrospective. I'm having a lot of fun replaying all these games again. They're so good. I can't wait to get to Remake. It's like the best game ever made. It's way too good. If you guys didn't know, I have a Patreon for this channel, and any support you can give would mean the world to me. I'm doing a show for Patreon called Inside the Sphere. It's a really cool laid-back freeform chat show where I talk news and other video game related things. There are 2 episodes available right now, and if you're interested, please check out the link down below. Anyway guys, I'll see you in Resident Evil 2.